Hello and welcome to a new episode of Deprogrammed. I am your host, Keri Smith. Welcome to the new year. Project 2025 has just taken effect. I'm kidding. That's a joke. There are people on social media who didn't know I was joking. But welcome to 2025. I'm very happy to be here and to tell you this is the first interview for the first Deprogrammed interview of 2025. And I'm here with Mikale Olson, who is a Christian writer and conservative commentator. He's a contributor to the Federalist and a podcaster. You can find him on X at Real Mick Olson. Please welcome Mikale.
How's
Hello.
it going?
Good.
Good to be here.
Now you say you also go by Mick.
Yes.
Okay.
Mick is good. Mikale's a little, people read it all the time and they pronounce it all sorts of different ways. So Mick is good for all those out there. So
it sounds so formal and regal, Mikale.
Yes. Yeah. Or like a Russian dictator,
Yes,
so.
that also. Yes. Well, welcome to Deprogrammed. I'm so happy that you could be here. As I was telling you before we started, I just recently ran across you on X, and I thought this is a person who's very awake, has his eyes open, and to kind of set up some of the stuff I want to talk about. Well, first, before we get into that, you're a Christian, as I mentioned in the intro. You're a Christian writer. Have you always been? Were you raised in the church, or when did you come to Christ?
Yeah. So I was. So my dad. I was kind of raised in ministry. So my dad has always been in vocational ministry at some level or another, Christian school teacher, pastor, youth pastor, et cetera, et cetera. And so right now he's still a Christian school teacher at a high school here in Wisconsin. And so I was always raised in that. He's a Southern Seminary grad, grew up around, him going to seminary classes. My uncle also has a PhD seminary degree as well. One of my other uncles is a pastor. So it's kind of like everybody in the family is more or less in vocational ministry at some level or another. So I kind of grew up around that. I always tell people it's like growing up around Jordan Peterson in a way, where the conversations, like when I hear Mikale Peterson talk about growing up with Jordan, the way she talks about it, I can very much relate to, where the conversations at the dinner table are revolving around politics and philosophy and apologetics and all that kind of stuff. So I grew up around that stuff. I think that's kind of what really gave me an interest in politics and writing and ultimately theology and that sort of thing. And so, but I didn't officially become a Christian until about middle of 2020, I would say. So I kind of had this like growing up in the church story where I was involved, but I wasn't really a thing I truly believed, at least in any meaningful sense. I maybe objectively believed it in the way of it being a fact of reality, but it wasn't something personal to me. And then it wasn't until 2020 where I officially became a Christian.
And what changed for you?
That's a good question. It was, I think part of it was walking away from, kind of from the setting that I grew up in. So I was, went to a Christian high school, and everybody I knew was a Christian. Everybody in my family, pretty much, at least on the side of the family that I'm around the most, were Christians. And so I kind of had this like, screw it, I'm going to go to public school for college. And I just kind of went through that, partying, public school phase, I guess. And I just burned out and realized this is not at all what I want. This is like, it was kind of one of those, like, everything I was told as a kid by my parents was actually right.
You found that it was true.
Yeah. So, and that's really when I started to get more into politics, and especially during 2020, I think that's what really woke me up as well. Everything closed down here in Wisconsin. And so there wasn't a lot going on, and I just started reading a lot. I stopped going to the bar as much. That's when I started to prioritize going back to church and all that. And so that mixed with seeing all the weird political stuff going on with BLM and COVID and all that, it just kind of really piqued my interest. And I just started picking up books. Like one of the first books I actually read, as far as that goes, as far as political theory goes, was that book James Lindsay and Helen Pluckros wrote years ago, Cynical Theories. And that kind of was a springboard for me in a way to, studying what all this social justice stuff really is about, and woke ideology and things like that. And so it's just kind of been a downhill from there, I guess. So in a good way.
Down.
So originally, I actually had a podcast back in, it was like 2020 all the way to about the end of 2021, early 2022, and it ended up getting banned because of all the COVID stuff. I just couldn't keep my mouth shut about that stuff. and I did that. And then I also had like, it was me and one of my friends, we would go do street interviews. That's when I lived in Austin. And so we would go to the Capitol. There was a bunch of protests going on at the time with the Ukraine stuff and the 6-week abortion ban thing that was going on at the time, and COVID and all this different stuff, and LGBTQ stuff going on. And so there was constantly something to go, interview people at. And it was more or less like let's go and see what these leftists, social justice people really think, try to break through the social media hype of everything and kind of, boots on the ground sort of journalism, I guess you could say. That channel was doing really well, and then ended up getting banned. And then I took a break for a long time and kind of just kicked it off again. Just started up a YouTube channel very recently. I think I only have like 5 or 6 videos, but so far my videos are kind of centering around more or less a Christian approach to culture and politics. So how should a Christian view what's going on in our culture, what's going on in the political realm? Because I think there's a lot of Christian, which we'll talk about when we get into this woke right stuff. There's a lot of Christian voices out there that pivot themselves as being kind of the lone bulwark against the evil in our world and against, the left in many ways. But really, it's a lot of the same crap that you see, and anywhere else in the world. It's not very Christian. So my goal is to just kind of like actually provide as best I can, some objective Christian analysis and approach to what's going on in our culture. But
I love it. I can't wait for you to do more videos. As you said, there's only a few on this new one. Hopefully your 3rd channel won't get banned.
Hopefully.
Well, let's hop right into it. I've already done a video asking, is there a woke right? Woke right is a new turn of phrase that some people are using, James Lindsay being one of them, but some people are using to describe what I think has traditionally been called, white nationalism, anti-Semitism, Groypers, the Nick Fuentes guys.
Love them. They found me on X now, and I must have made some bad list of theirs, and I just get dogpiled all the time.
They're such children. Like, we can get to that too.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So, and I think also this group was called for a while called alt-right. The thing is that terms are always changing, and we're living in an age where a lot of words have lost all meaning because of the woke left, because of the way that they misuse terms. And so I have to add, because this is an evolving phrase, I have to ask people, what do you mean by that when you use that phrase? Now, I'm on record. I'm not a huge fan of the phrase. I always put it in quotes right now because I think that it's a tactical reason. I think that we've just gotten to the point where a lot of normies are starting to understand what woke means. And I think of woke as very specifically this leftist social justice ideology that's all about pitting identity groups against one another for power, instead of old school Marxism, which was about, pitting different class groups against one another, for a fight for wealth. This is about a fight for power. And so we've just gotten to that point. And so tactically, I think, to then talk about woke right, my fear is that it might muddy the waters a bit and people will start to lose understanding of what it means. But I don't see another phrase emerging that so
I honestly think just calling them like I honestly think just maybe neo-fascist, or I put this on Twitter before, just fascist is fine. But then even that word, there's a lot of historical connotations that go along with that don't necessarily, I feel like no matter what term you use, it's not a necessarily direct one-to-one comparison. Right. There's certain aspects of the term woke that are necessary in defining this whole phenomenon, or fascist, or, ethno-nationalist, or whatever you want to call it. But I kind of agree with you where the term woke, right, isn't maybe necessarily the best term, but it seems to be like the street lingo that everyone's caught on to.
Yes.
To the point where it's even trending on Twitter. And you see big accounts like Michael Knowles or other people tweeting about it. And so I think it's a term that works. I think people, when you say the term, people kind of know what you're talking about. maybe the term itself isn't necessarily, again, that one-to-one comparison. It's not totally accurate. It's not maybe the best descriptor overall, but it's a term that's used and people can point to, oh yeah, that's what you're talking about. These are the people you're referring to.
Yes.
I think we're at that point, which is good. So it's becoming a little bit more framed than it was, let's say, even a month or two ago.
Yes. Well, in the interest of making ourselves very clear, can you offer a definition of what you mean or what you think is meant when you see that phrase woke right?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two things going on. I think one of them is describing behavior, and the other one is talking about a certain ideological, operating system, as James Lindsay says, which I think he words that very well when he words it that way. One of them, so my friend Lucas over at Method Ministries, if you want to go look his X account up, it's really good. I did an episode with him where we talked about this a little bit. And we basically defined it as kind of like when you call, let's say you're joking around with your friends and you call your friend gay and he's not actually gay, but he's acting gay, and you make fun of him, and you're like when you insult him by using that term, you're not actually saying he's literally gay. You're describing a behavior or making fun of something that he's doing. And so I think that's kind of how I see a lot of people. I know I've certainly used the term that way, where it's like you're making fun of people on the right that are acting like the left. They're being oversensitive. They're not, like, for example, Candace Owens having no sense of humor over this whole Babylon Bee issue.
Yes.
She's acting like the woke left. So people have been calling her woke as a result, not because her ideology is necessarily a one-to-one comparison with the woke left, but because she's acting like them. It's a description of her behavior at that time. That's one way people use it. I think another way, and James Lindsay, of course, has laid this out, I think, better than anyone on X so far, the ideological comparisons between the two. So kind of what you said earlier, to simplify it, this identitarian, this racially centric identitarianism. I think that's a good way to describe it. As far as power dynamics, it's authoritarian, just like the woke left.
Yep.
It's monarchistic. It's neo-integralist. It's big government. It's very, very similar in those ways. And these are all comparisons that you could make between just fascism and communism in general.
Yes.
They're two sides of the same coin, where the fascists, of course, always pit themselves as the lone bulwark. You even see this with the woke right movement. We're the only true resistance against the communist left. But the things that they actually want to implement aren't really all that different. It's kind of two paths to the same end in a way, where the individual rights of people are stripped away. The government seems to have complete control, usually, culminating in some monarchistic or dictatorial figure. Or, of course, on the communist left, it's the dictator of the proletariat. On the woke right, it's this Franco, Mussolini, even Hitler adjacent, strong man that's going to rule us all and solve all of our problems in society. Either way, you're kind of arriving at the same thing. It's a removal of the Constitution. It's post-constitutional. They call themselves post-liberals, which, of course, they're referring to classical liberalism, which is just American classical constitutionalism. And so they're in a sense, just like the woke left. They hate the individual. They are race identitarians. They hate the Constitution. They want to throw it in the paper shredder because that's in the way of their authoritarian aims. They're kind of oddly religious to the point where they want to force their specific religious tradition onto everybody else and force it by the sword, meaning the government or the state. Neither of those things.
Which is like the woke. The woke do the same thing.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So the things that they want to impose are not necessarily the same, but the operating system, or even you could say the authoritarian place that they'll eventually arrive, isn't so different. I mean, again, you look at Hitler versus Stalin. Yeah, they have a lot. They talk about having very different goals, but what's really all that different in the end? Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, kind of what we're seeing. So when we say woke right, this is what we're talking about. It's a new form of fascism. It's kind of like what the Marxists today say, where they'll point to communism in the past and they'll point at Stalin or Lenin or Pol Pot or whoever else, and they'll say, yeah, that was an atrocity. They just didn't do it right. We're going to do it right now. This is the same thing that they're doing with fascism on the woke right. Yes. Yeah, Hitler didn't do it right. We're going to do it right this time. It's the same thing.
I've seen some of them outright just so anybody who's doubting, because a lot of people will watch a show like mine, or they might, come across some of my posts on Facebook, but they don't spend a lot of time on X. And so I feel like they don't really have the temperature of things that are starting to bubble up sometimes.
Yeah.
And so if you spend time on X, though, you will see these people saying outright, I am a fascist.
Yeah.
Some of them, not all, but some of them say it. Some of them say outright what you mentioned about wanting to shred the Constitution. That they want to get
Yes.
rid of the Constitution. They'll just admit it. Um,
It's crazy. In big
yeah,
accounts, like I'll name drop one guy, Elijah
yeah,
Schaefer. He's been saying stuff
yeah,
like this, where he's outright saying, maybe we should take a second look at Hitler. Maybe he wasn't so bad. Things like this. Why are
yes,
they saying this? Because they assume they're operating from this worldview and from this revisionist style history. It's not true that the uh, the the Third Reich was the lone bulwark against communists. Kind of making their claim in the West, and the Allied powers are the villains of World War II because we stopped Hitler from stopping the communists, and so we kind of were doing the bidding. Which there's itty bitty pieces of truth to that you can extract, but that's overall not true. And so, um, but this is what they do. It's all about revising history. Everything today is a lie, so therefore everything in the past that we've been told must be a lie. If they tell us today that Hitler's bad in our history books, then Hitler must have been okay, and we should start re-questioning that. If fascism is bad as they say today, then maybe we should re-examine whether or not dictatorships and monarchism and fascism and neo-integralism is a good thing. And this is just what you're saying. It's not, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the conversation, but
no, go ahead.
it's not coming from a place in my mind of honesty, whether that's philosophical or theological honesty or cultural honesty, whether that's historical honesty. It's coming from a place of reactionism, of anger, of resentment, of jealousy, same exact motivators that we see on the woke left.
Yes,
And it's not Christian.
it's
That's
not Christian.
bottom line. It is not Christian.
Let's
And
talk about the
so,
Groypers for a second, because there's
yeah,
all different parts of this growing, just like there's all different parts of the woke movement, and there are the people who are at the academic level who are coming up with the theory and pushing the theory, and then you've got the activists who are implementing it, on the street and
yep,
online and spreading the ideology online, and then you've got the sort of woke adjacent soccer mom who's going to the protests and doesn't really understand what it's all about and thinks she's on the side of good. You've got all different types in this sort of what we're calling woke right, what's being called woke right. The Groyper element. Oh, so I call them white nationalists who
oh
follow
yeah, 100%.
100% anti-Semitic, who follow Nick Fuentes, and these guys claim, as Nick does, claim to be Catholic, claim to be Christian. A lot of them have Christ is King in their bios. And when you interact with them, if you're unlucky enough to interact with them online, like you've been,
Yeah,
these are the same people who are in your comments say off the bat, like "F you," full
oh
on,
yeah,
go F yourself. Why don't you go suck some Jew, COCK? Like
yeah,
just discussing, calling everybody a Jew. Like you're a Jew and you sound like a Jew, and just like overtly racist,
yeah.
hateful,
They are the
disgusting.
thing that the left claims all conservatives and Trump voters are. That's
Yes,
what they are. and
yes,
and overtly so. And like what you said, they'll put Christ is King in their bio or things like this that are phrases. I posted something on this on X recently as well, and James Lindsay was posting something about this where it's kind of their Black Lives Matter. So it's
yes.
the Mott
I
and
agree.
Bailey. So they'll take a phrase, Christ is King, a phrase no Christian or most conservatives, even most Americans would disagree with necessarily at face value. Yeah, we all agree, especially as
Yes,
Christians here, Christ is King. He's not only King of our own personal lives and our families and our homes, but the universe, right? Everything. It's like that famous Abraham Kuyper quote that I'm trying to remember how it goes. I'm blanking here. Something about like how where Christ looks at every square inch of existence and screams mine, right? That is the God that we believe in. And so
mhm.
when we say Christ is King, if you or I were to say that, or most normal
People.
Christians that are not
Yeah.
terminally online that aren't Groypers, that's what they would mean. They're like, yeah, Christ is the ruler of everything, and therefore we should align our lives under that reality. But what they mean is all their weird ethno-nationalist, anti-Semitic political theories. and they
Yes.
push it and they put it underneath a phrase like that. And then when you disagree with their crazy political theories, they accuse you of saying, well, you don't believe Christ is king? You're not a
Yes.
Christian? You're not a
Yes.
conservative? This is what they do. This is what Black Lives Matter does with their thing. As soon as you say, yeah, I'm not for, the destruction of the natural family, they'll say, oh, so you don't care about Black lives? We're the ones that care about Black lives. Can't you see by our banner here? It's a Mott and Bailey. It's a bait and switch.
It's a
It's
Mott and
completely
Bailey.
dishonest.
And for anyone who might be a little lost, I just want to underline this point because I think it's so important, and that's exactly how they're using that phrase. There was a big debate about this on X, in the middle of the year, and it's hard to even point out what they're doing because the tactic, as you said, is to then accuse you of disagreeing with the benign meaning, which of course you agree with. So anybody who's lost, what Mikale's saying is, like with Black Lives Matter, if you say, I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, I don't like what they're doing, I don't like what they stand for and what they're pushing, and then they retreat to the Mott and they say, oh, that means you don't think Black Lives Matter? No, it doesn't at all. It's because it has this other nefarious meaning, and that's how these
Yes.
people are using it in a nefarious way. And it's actually, as a Christian, one of the things I kept pointing out is they're perverting the name of Christ when they do that. Because
Yeah.
when they say
Right.
Christ is king, that's not what they mean. They mean something disgusting. And
Yes.
so to me, it's
It's
like,
horrible.
it's
It's a
horrible.
Trojan horse. It's like it really, I mean, that's really what a Mott and Bailey is. It's like a Trojan horse. They're Trojan horsing in really bad ideas, really anti-Christian ideas under a Christian banner. So then it's a way to insulate themselves from criticism, because now they're wearing the name of Christ on their shields. And as soon as you start shooting arrows at them, you could say metaphorically, they accuse you of shooting arrows at Christ, of shooting arrows at Christianity, or of conservatism,
Right.
or of whatever it is that they say that they represent, or of the MAGA movement, right? They claim that they're like kind of the center and the cornerstone of this whole, populist MAGA movement, and they're nothing. They're anything but that, really.
They also
And
have this very, I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, you're
Continue.
good.
Well, I was going to say the other, some weird just things about this movement, if you guys haven't seen them, I think that most of them, they appear to be young. If they're not young, they behave like they're very young.
Mm-hmm.
I assume, and this is not meant as an insult, this is meant as an observation of the way things are. I get the feeling that many of them have either had a dysfunctional home life, or an absent father, or abuse in the home of some kind, because they're sort of that Peter Pan, um,
Yeah.
just never grow up kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And then they're also, although they claim to be trad Catholics, they call heterosexuality gay. They say, loving your wife
Yeah.
and as a married man
It's
is gay and makes you a cuck. And they say, and they have some really aberrant, I guess I would say, sexual predilections for people who claim to be trad Catholics. It's like,
yeah.
it doesn't
It's none of it
make
adds
any.
up. They're complete hypocrites. They're not what they say they are. It's that simple. It's like BLM. BLM does not care about Black people.
Yeah.
They're quite the opposite. They're tormenting the Black community. They destroyed, I don't know how many Black homes and Black businesses and all this stuff, and robbed people of their money. They've done anything but help Black people. This is exactly the Groyper movement, what they are to the conservative movement, and to Christian values or Christian work in the political sphere. Is they are a complete stain. They're the opposite of what we as Christians should actually be doing in the public square. And the sad part is, and I'll at least give BLM this. A lot of them don't do it claiming the name of Christ. They're
Yeah.
adamantly opposed to Christ, and they're not afraid to say it out loud.
Yeah.
The troubling thing about the Groypers, and this, even we'll get into the Christian nationalism thing too, is they do all of it in Christ's name, as if they're representing him, as if, and then when the world looks at them, they're looking at what Christ would be doing on earth right now if he was here in 2024, standing, at the voting poll. If he was on X, this is how it would be. It's completely blasphemous and evil, and it's the spirit of the Antichrist in many ways, I believe. And I think the purpose of it really is that it's to foment chaos and division and struggle sessions. Same exact purpose of the woke left. It's their social justice arm. It's the woke left's, the neo-fascist social justice arm, where the whole purpose of it is to create and foment some sort of revolution. So they want to destroy things. They want to destroy peace in our communities. They want to destroy peace in the political sphere. They don't want us getting along. It's a lot of that. So
You can see that, to piggyback on what you said, you can see that in the recent election because Nick Fuentes and Groypers, actively campaigned against Trump. He told his followers not to vote for Trump, that he was not going to vote for Trump because they wanted Kamala Harris to win because they said that's what we deserved, and that would get us to that revolution faster. That would get us to a terrible place faster.
It just shows
right?
They don't, kind of what you said before. These are not people that have responsibilities. These are not people that probably have families. If they actually had families or kids or people they cared about or like things that they could lose, why would they want revolution like that? Why would they want it? It doesn't make any sense unless you're just kind of like, screw it, I don't care about anything. It's very self-serving. And I think a lot of these people as well, they're not competent people. They haven't accomplished anything. They're not very smart. They're just angry, disenfranchised young men who are very resentful. And their only way to get ahead in this world is to destroy it. And so this is parallel. There's that parallel to the woke left. So it's very sad, honestly. I don't know.
I'm so happy that I found you online because I'm in this. I said this to you beforehand, but I'll say it again for the benefit of the audience or anyone who may be watching. But after COVID, during COVID policy, I should say, I felt like we were going through something of a kind of a great revealing about the people around us, and there were people who I thought were very awake on the woke issue and on the woke ideology, who then during the COVID years proved themselves to be fully in support of authoritarianism.
Yes.
And it was like, wow, like I lost a lot of respect for some people, but I was also very grateful that was revealed to me about them. And ever since October 7th, with this rising, ethno-nationalism, anti-Semitism, racism, I've started to see, like you mentioned, people like Candace Owens, Elijah Schaefer. I'm like, thank you for this great revealing that I'm starting to see that this person is completely back asswards on like I'm glad that I now know, and I feel like we're in that point where there's another sorting happening, and so when we're going through a great revealing or great sorting, I'm all about, it's almost like the path is whittled down even further in terms of people that I really trust and respect. And so,
Totally.
I'm so grateful to have found you because just following you for a short time now, I'm like, this guy's, he's awake to what's going on.
I appreciate that. I really do. Right.
Yeah.
Likewise, right back to you.
Yeah.
As far as like what you said there about like kind of there's this new sorting, this new lines are being drawn. I think a lot of these guys that you're seeing now kind of, being isolated, I guess you could say, from people like us, they're people who we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, before the recording, where they're people that got their popularity pretty much specifically by resisting the woke left in many ways, specifically in Christian circles. So, with Tim Keller and the Gospel Coalition and Russell Moore at Christianity Today, Mike Cosper, certain people over in the SBC, J.D. Greer resisting him and some of the stuff he was promoting.
The Christian ones, some of the ones in the Christian area got their followers by resisting those guys.
Yes. So like guys like Joel Webben, guys like Doug Wilson, guys like, and I wouldn't put Doug Wilson in the same camp anymore necessarily. As I have some concerns about him for sure, but overall, I wouldn't put him in the same camp as someone like a Joel Webben or an Eric Conn or Brian Swabe or Stephen Wolf or McIntyre or some of these guys, right? Like the Trash World Conference guys. I don't know if you guys have seen this stuff on Twitter.
Yes.
But these guys specifically came out of evangelical Big Eva, as it's called. So this would be, again, like the Gospel Coalition, Acts 29, certain parts of the SBC that were going woke left, that were embracing diversity, equity, inclusion, that were embracing critical race theory, that were even embracing some of the LGBTQ stuff, going soft on it, that were telling people to mask up and get their shots at church, people like J.D. Greer. There's a lot of people that rightfully, like Joel Webben and the Ogden Press, or what's it called? New Christendom Press there in Ogden. These guys rightfully resisted this stuff. And as a result, they got a lot of following. They got a lot of new subscribers because there's a lot of people as a result that were disenfranchised, that were kind of like felt lost. Where do we go now? Okay, we just left Acts 29 because they're promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and selling or hosting Robin DiAngelo's books on their website.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Now we don't want to go to this church anymore. Where do we go? Who do we turn to? Who do we listen to now? And then these guys caught all those people on their net, including me at one point.
Me too. Well, I follow all those guys. Like they've all said things at some point that I thought, this is great. This is based in reality. This guy's right on. Like they, when this new great sorting started happening, and I'm looking at what some people are saying, I'm like, I follow this guy. What's he talking about now? Like this is not what I saw.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think a big part of that is, again, these guys, for example, Eric Conn, he went to Southern Seminary. My brother actually knew him back because my brother went to Boys College, their undergrad there for about a year, I think, and was somewhat acquainted with Eric Conn and some other people in that circle that knew him. And so he, as discovering, when there was the struggle sessions, you could say, going on in the SPC, a lot of this I think has kind of been solved for the most part. But, years ago, it was a lot of heavy debates about critical race theory and adopting this in seminary and in different churches and things like that. And people like Eric Conn left. And I would agree with him back then in leaving. But then they just went way too far. It was like this overcorrection. And now they're getting into this like monoethnic nationalism and Kinism even, or, this weird anti-Semitic theories about Jews. They're getting into just outright promoting fascism now. Like today, for example, Eric Conn, today upon recording this, what's the date today? This is it the second
Today's
or third
January
or something?
2nd.
Yeah. So everything's such a blur now. But today you see Eric Conn tweeting a picture of the 20th century Spanish dictator Franco with the the blue glowing eyes and the red avatar, and someone commented under that something like, this isn't a good look. This guy, killed a bunch of people in my family without trial. And Eric Conn basically tweets back and eventually says, this, the guy that tweeted a whole paragraph or two explaining what was behind that. And then Eric Conn basically says back, well, you shouldn't have been a socialist. And there it is.
I want to show this because this he's a pastor, right?
Yeah.
And he shared this photo of Franco. And someone in the comments, here it is on the screen for anyone, just so you can evaluate this on your own. Someone says, he killed multiple members of my family without trial. I'm sorry, but this is a massive L. And then Eric Conn asked, who were they and why were they killed? And the guy says they were great uncles and several relatives. They were cozy with socialist ideas, specifically on matters of providing land for more people, healthcare and such. My grandfather would tell us stories of him having to bring food to his family members in jail. They were not fed until one, and then you can't see the rest of it there. And then Eric Conn tweets this photo of Ken from the Barbie movie and says, I mean, don't be a socialist then.
It's just,
and that's a pastor.
It's unbelievable watching this, because I don't understand how they get to this point where, like me and like you and like so many others, I for one, I went to an Acts 29 church. I left. I became acquainted with these guys as a result. They were saying a lot of good things and exposing a lot of necessary things that were going on in these certain evangelical circles, like stuff that Megan Basham, for example, has talked about a lot in her book, a lot of which I agree with, that needs to be talked about. But then they go from there to, actually, we're going to praise authoritarianism over here, and we're going to praise the same kind of critical theorist analysis, which Stephen Wolfe just full out admits at this point that he's a critical theorist. And we're going to praise, a lot of the same evils that we just said we rejected over here.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sitting here like, what is going on?
But they're just reshuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic, because they're basically like, okay, like Stephen Wolfe, as you mentioned, yes, I'm a critical theorist now. Okay, I thought we were criticizing that. But what's different about it is they're just changing the identity, the order of the identity groups, the order of the affinity groups.
It's like what we said before, where it's like what the woke left does. Oh yeah, the communists of old, they did it wrong. We're going to do it right today. This is exactly what you see Stephen Wolfe and Eric Conn and Brian Soave and all these guys, and a lot of the American Reformer writers, Cary Gant, Charles Haywood, etc. They're like, oh yeah, we're actually going to do yeah, Hitler might have done some things wrong, but we're going to do it correct this time. We're going to implement it right this time. We're going to do fascism right. It's they've drank their own Kool-Aid in a way. Mm-hmm. And I honestly to this day don't understand how it got to this point. How can you go from being so right on in their, how can they go from being so right on in their criticism of the woke left in Big Eva to all of a sudden embracing a lot of the same faulty theories that they just rejected over there in the first place? It's like, do they not realize it? Or are they just under a spell or something? It's like, I don't get it.
I think sin, that verse about how sin is like a cat crouching at your door, or something like, that's just, you have to be
from Genesis, from Cain and Abel. Yeah.
From Genesis. And I think about this all the time when there are people who I view as having lost their way. I always wonder, did they lose their way? Were they always like this, or did they lose their way, and did their priorities change? And I don't know. I think it
Money.
depends the person. Yes.
Yeah.
Because when you get that, as you mentioned, a lot of these guys gained a big following through righteously criticizing the woke left. And when you gain that fault, like, you have to be prepared. You have to take care that your ego doesn't become your primary focus. And if you're a person who thinks, I don't have a problem with ego, then that's the cat at your door, because you're like, I'm good. Or you're not paying attention to that one. And so I think for some of them, it might just be that it's just sort of everything's gone to their head. I'm going to mention one that really has disappointed me, and it's Joel Webon. There's a clip of him. I tried to follow along. It's sort of this whole back and forth and these wars that have been happening. I'm sort of tangentially watching some of it and trying to understand what's going on.
There's so many, it's hard to keep up with.
And I tried to follow along with this beef with him and this other pastor Tobias, and about the church member. And I was watching some of the videos Joel was putting out, and I was agreeing with a lot of what he was saying, until there was this very revealing moment. And again, this is a pastor. And there was a very revealing moment, mask off moment, where he looked at the camera and basically was addressing this guy, Tobias, this other pastor. And he said, and that's why these young men, meaning these young men who are drawn to fascism and Nazism, he's like, that's why these young men will continue to seek me out, and nobody will remember your name. And it just shook me, because it's like, you're a Christian pastor. This is not about your name. This is about the name of God. Like, how are you, if I were a shepherd in your flock, and I can see through that revealing comment that, this is about your name and your fame. And, I don't trust you to guide me anymore, because I need someone who's putting God in that slot. And so all this to say, I think some of it is just, some people may have had, like him, were on the right path and lost their way. Others, I don't know, maybe just were never on the right path. Maybe it was always ego at the top of that priority, that hierarchy. I don't know.
I think it's, so one of the things, for example, Megan Basham talks about in her book Shepherds for Sale, in the very beginning of the book, she talks about like the different kind of the hierarchy, you could say, of people that are sold out. So there's the people that are deliberately selling people out, where they know they're liars and they're profiting off of the destruction of others. There's the hirelings underneath them, and then there's the people underneath them, and then there's the people underneath that. Like, there's different tier levels of people doing it for different reasons. And I think you're right, where some of these people, like, they know they're lying, they know they're deceiving people, they know that they're just in it for profit and personal gain, and they don't care. And they're gonna, like, I think a lot of the Groypers, like Nick Fuentes, for example, would be in that category.
Yes.
I think that someone like Joel Webon, I don't think that it started necessarily that way, but I think it's going in that direction, because again, if you're not constantly checking your own heart and checking your own ego at the door, once people start subscribing to you, once you start getting paid to say certain things, you're going to start patting yourself on the back and having a large view of yourself that's going to make it harder and harder for you to listen to just and righteous criticism that you need at times. Everybody needs it. And so someone like Joel Webon, for example, I think that's what it is. I think it's, at least from what I can tell, and I don't know him personally, so it's hard to say with any of these guys because I don't know them personally, but from what I can see online, at least, if you watch a lot of his older videos, like when he was talking about Acts 29 and all this stuff, his whole demeanor seemed different. He seemed a lot more calm, a lot more humble, a lot more interested in actually leading you to a biblical conclusion. And now it seems like he's not really, he wants to lead you to his own political conclusion. He's constantly talking about his own subscribers. He's constantly talking about how many clicks he gets on his videos. That Candace Owens shared a clip from his video, and she played my clip for 10 minutes of just me talking. And he's constantly saying stuff like this.
That was
constantly gloating
right
about
after
himself.
Yes, and that was right after he said women shouldn't be podcasters. Essentially, that's not a direct quote, but he was.
That's what he was alluding to. That was
Yes.
that was the gist of what he was saying. I mean, and then the funny part about that is it came out, the very person he was kind of criticizing there was Allie Beth Stuckey. Turns out he paid Allie Beth Stuckey for an ad placement, which included a 10-minute interview that was, according to Allie, not organic at all. She'd never do it again. It was just like hand in the cookie jar moment for Joel right there. But like, yeah, I think that's what it is. I think another thing that it could be, for example, with a guy like Eric Conn, who to me, he's always seemed like an egomaniac ever since I've seen him online. He said a lot of things that I've agreed with in the past, but his whole demeanor to me, has not been the same necessarily as the evolution of Joel Webbon. It's always seemed more ego than anything. And this is just me. People might disagree with this, and that's okay. But yeah, I think for someone like that, it's resentment, it's anger. You feel burned by the SBC, an institution you placed trust in for so long, and you paid to go to their school, and now it's been revealed where their ideological allegiances really lie, and you feel duped and you feel stupid, and now you're angry, and now you're on this revenge path against the SBC and against the left that has burned you in a sense. And I think that's another big motivating factor for these guys. It's anger. It's I not only want to defeat I not only want to defeat Big Eva, but I'm so angry against them. I want to become them so I can have the power that they have, so then I can crush them. And I think that's where, I mean, you see this in their political rhetoric. How many times do guys like Eric Conn tweet things like, we need to crush our enemies and things like this? It's not an attitude that you'd expect a Christian pastor to have ever. Yeah. And it's certainly like, if I'll say it right out. Like if I saw my pastor acting this way online, I would not go to that. I would not go to his church anymore. Yeah. I just wouldn't do it.
I should correct myself. I just realized when I was saying that earlier, I think I said if I were a shepherd in his flock. I meant if I were a sheep in his flock.
Yes.
It would be very concerning. The behavior, that's where I think you see, the Bible verse, you shall know them by their fruits. Webbon is now, there have been leaks from this Telegram account that he's in where he's encouraging people to create multiple anonymous accounts
and just attack people.
People and to repost his stuff and everything. And when those leaked and were shared, I guess he decided to just double down, because you would think that would be humiliating and you would be ashamed and you would ask, for forgiveness for that. But he didn't. He just, as a pastor, then started publicly calling for people to attack his enemies. Like there was some other Christian guy. He's like, we need to mock him until he leaves X.
Owen Strachan.
Yeah.
Yes. We need Anon accounts to mock certain people off of Twitter. There are certain people who are on X right now who need to be on blue skies. And by God's grace, a lot of them have left.
That's right.
Still waiting on Owen Strachan. But there are some others that I think by God's grace, if we can get just a few more Anon accounts, I think we can do it.
And my jaw just has been dropping so much, and I've just been trying to figure out like what is going on. I think it's just a dark kind of like spirit that people are under, that there's just something afoot. We're in this moment of victory in the US, having won this election, and I was not confident that was going to happen because I don't really necessarily trust our elections anymore anyway. And and we're in this spirit of victory, and now it's sort of this this darkness that's rising that I'm like, why do we have to fight this now?
Well, that's what makes me think it's like, it's not organic. There's something that just feels off about this whole thing, even with the Groypers. So for those of you that are confused watching, there's like kind of different sects, you could say, or factions of the woke right. There's the Groypers, they're like the Catholic, white nationalist, Nick Fuentes sect. There's the Christian nationalists, which would be the Eric Conn, the Brian Suave, the New Christendom Press guys, Right Response Ministries, Stephen Wolfe, yeah. And these are kind of I'd say probably the two main factions of this whole movement. And then I guess there's kind of more of the like Elijah Schaefer.
Yes,
they're
then
not
there
really
are
the Candace Owens, the Elijah
influencers
Schaefer.
who I think are just absolutely grifting. I don't think
Yeah, they're just kind of floating around the edges of it. They're not they're not the real ideologues, you could say. The real ideologues would be the Groypers or the Christian nationalists. Christian nationalists, because that term can have a good meaning. So I think a lot of people, when they use the term, I've used the term before in a good way, where it just means I'm a Christian who is against globalism, who loves my country.
Yes.
A lot of people mean it to just mean patriotic Christian. That's not what these people mean.
Country first. Let's break that down, because that's going to be confusing for people too. It's almost like the Christ is King phrase.
Yeah.
I have to ask people when they talk about Christian nationalism, define it for me, because it depends on which way you're using
100%.
it. And so define those two different meanings of Christian nationalism.
So the first one is just kind of what I said, where it's just, I'm a Christian and I love my country, and I think Christians should be involved in the public square because it's an extension of loving your neighbor, right? That's what I believe. If that's all Christian nationalism means, sign me up.
I would add to that we take care of our country first, so then we can take care of others.
Where you're nationalistic in the sense where you believe in the sovereignty of nations, and you're against a new world global order.
Yes.
So if that's Christian nationalism, sign me up. I'm sure you would say the same. But what these people mean is specifically mono-ethnic nationalism. So where they believe, when they say nation, Stephen Wolfe talks about this in his book. He defines nation, in part at least, by a specific ethnic group. So nationalism is the preserving of a specific ethnic group. So Anglo-Saxon white people, for example. Nationalism would be preserving a nation or a place for a specific ethnic group. And each place or nation or each country should be comprised of one nation of people, one ethnic group if possible, or two at most. So that would be Kinism is another word for it. A lot of these people, and Stephen Wolfe, for example, has said this on Twitter before, that, most of the time interracial marriage is a sin. You'll hear guys like Corey Mailer say this as well from Stone Choir podcast, harping on this interracial marriage is a sin. It's a moral duty. You'll hear guys like Andrew Isker or CJ Engel say this as well, that, it's like a moral imperative to preserve your own race or ethnic heritage. So if you're a white person, you need to surround yourself by white people, preserve your land for white people alone, and only marry other white people. And so it's just, this is what they mean. So when they say Christian nationalism, they really just mean kinism with kind of a Christian flavor. Yeah. And it's the same arguments you've heard the KKK make back in the day. It's the same arguments you've heard, the Third Reich make. And of course, it all kind of culminates in this weird hatred of Jewish people for some reason every time. And it's very strange. And so it's always important to ask. When people say that phrase, ask, what do you mean by that? Because they could either mean something that's awesome and that I think every Christian should subscribe to a certain degree, or they could mean that.
Yeah.
So
we're in an age where, because of the influence and the dominance of the woke left for so long, and the postmodern influence there of the destruction of meaning, the destruction of language, that I almost every conversation takes 10 times longer now, because it's like, okay, what define that? What do you mean by that?
Exactly. It's the way that they commandeer language and weaponize it, and it starts with them confusing the language. So, I mean, this is another parallel with the woke left. They're all about language, and they're all about taking certain words away or redefining other words or punishing you for using certain phrases or rewarding you for using others. It's all about how do we redefine the language that people use. And that's a very postmodern thing, right? And so you see this obviously with guys like Stephen Wolfe, with guys like CJ Engel or Andrew Torba, or a number of these guys on the so-called Christian nationalist woke right, they're obsessed with kind of taking language that we would otherwise use flippantly and kind of carelessly and not really mean anything bad by it, and taking it and redefining it in their terms and then using their new definitions to weaponize against you.
Yes.
It's not honest. It's not intellectually honest. It's not morally honest. And so it's always good to have those conversations. You're right. It takes a lot longer to have conversations now.
It does.
But it's necessary because you can't let them get away with it. Always ask them, what do you mean by that? Define your terms. And I think once you start doing that, you'll quickly get to the bottom of what they're actually trying to accomplish. And I think it's anything but Christian.
You'll get to their meaning for that term or that phrase, and you'll figure out if it's what you mean when you use it. So you know if you actually are agreeing with this person or not.
Yes.
It's worth doing. What percentage of these people who are now being called woke right, and you've talked about a couple different parts, a couple different kinds. What percentage do you think are bots or plants? Because I'll tell you, here's something that
That's
I hear.
Great question.
Now that I've started talking about it, because here's why I'm talking.
I need to drink my beer for this one.
Have your beer. I'm gonna have some of my apple cider, honeycomb from.
For all the Wisconsin natives out here, this one is for you, the spotted cow. Or people have been to Wisconsin, they know what this is. So,
what was I saying? Oh, so for anyone in my audience and I've heard from a few of you, and you're like, I don't know why you're spending any time on this at all. This is what I hear sometimes. Why are you spending any time on this? This is not a big deal yet. This is not a big deal, and they rightly point out, well, even if this is a thing and this is a movement or an ideology, a movement of people, even if it is a danger, right? They say, rightly so, but they're not as powerful as the woke left. The woke left controls all of our institutions. The woke left controls our media, the entertainment industry, academia, K through 12. Like they've got it locked down. And so that's the big that's what you need to keep talking about, Keri, is that, that's why I listen. I want to hear you criticize the woke left and reveal them for what they are, and continue doing that. Okay, but here's my answer to that, and then I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
My answer to that is that when I first left the woke left in 2016, 2017, after coming to understand I was in a cult, and it was not a liberal cult. It was not liberal.
Yeah.
And starting to understand all the problems with it and to become horrified by it. And I got over my fear, which took me about 6 months of speaking out, and I started speaking out against it. And at that time, in 2016, 17, there were still a lot of people who I would say are classical liberals who were saying to me, why are you talking about this? It's not a big deal. They were saying it's not a big deal. It's just at college campuses. It's just in academia.
Exactly.
It's not a big deal. And then what happened? Yes. So 8 years later, it became a big deal pretty quickly. And it turns out it had been percolating for a long time before it became mainstream and culturally dominant. And so I don't know if that's what's going to happen with this. I actually think it's more likely that what happens is that this element, a so-called woke right element, empowers and emboldens the woke left even more. I think they're going to help them. They're going to be the right hand of the woke left.
It's like the dance partner of the woke left, where they're feeding off of each other, and they're giving each other a reason to constantly fight, and they're giving each other an enemy,
a reason to exist even.
And then the normal people here like us are just like, what's going on?
Yes,
this is ridiculous. This is so unnecessary.
So because of that experience of having been through that whole period where everyone was like, don't worry about it, this isn't a big deal, it doesn't have any influence, right? Okay, well, now I'm hearing that about the woke right. Don't worry about it, doesn't have any influence, they don't hold any actual power, yes, that's all true, but like the canary in the coal mine, you, Lindsay, myself, several others I still respect, Constant Kissin, are watching this evolve, and we're like, hey, this could be a problem for a number of reasons. Maybe we should stomp it out now. We should talk about it now, or cast a light on it now. And so in doing so, I hear people say, well, okay, even if it is a problem, even if it could be a problem, it's all bots. It's all plants. It's people, or they'll say it's leftists pretending to be woke right, to be the right hand of the left. What do you think? What is it? Is it a threat, and how much of it is real?
I think It's so hard to say. I think a lot of accounts that I've seen, at least, are bots, or they're bot farming. Or for those of you that don't know what bot farming is, there's people that literally, influencers and different movements, to literally pay people to create anon accounts and to just flood the algorithm with, if they want a certain post to blow up and to catch a wave in the algorithm and to get a bunch of clicks and views, they'll pay people to create anon accounts, a whole farm of them, and flood that account, like it, retweet it, hit the save button, hit all the buttons on a post so that it boosts it in the algorithm. This also can be used negatively. So if they want to like dogpile someone and basically scare them off the internet, as Joel Webbin said, let's bully Owen Strachan off the internet, they'll do the same thing. And so I think that there's a good number of these people where that's what's happening. I think a lot of it could be as well like Chinese influenced. So I've noticed this trend, and I heard James Lindsay talk about this as well in a recent video. And I can echo what he said, that I think he's absolutely right, because a lot of these accounts I've noticed that'll try to dogpile me, I'll go to their profile and they'll be like pro-Chinese Communist Party stuff in their profile. I'm like, that's interesting. Or they'll be like Russian flags and things like that in their profile. And these are countries that spend billions of dollars a year to basically buy media influence in the West, particularly in the United States. And so, of course, if there's going to be a movement that's going to split a party that's in political power right now, being the MAGA party, why wouldn't China want to get involved with this and try to push a wedge between MAGA voters in this coalition that's been built of Americans? Of course they'd want to. Of course they're going to want to foment case. They did the same thing with the left. I think that's a large purpose of what the left was. I think a lot of it was to kind of drive a wedge through the American people, to divide us so that we're easily controlled, easily conquered, et cetera, et cetera. And so
the woke stuff also, I'll just add a little note there. The woke stuff also killed all of the momentum of Occupy Wall Street. It's what tore it apart.
Yep, exactly. So I think we're seeing the same thing here. I think we're seeing a lot of bots and bot farms and foreign influence. But at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of legitimate people who legitimately are falling for this stuff, legitimate Groypers and Christian nationalists and white nationalists, where Twitter or Gab or these other social media platforms that don't really censor anything, and I don't think they should censor anything, but then they're used by these people because this is the only place they can go to actually vent their ideas. And so this is where they can go to kind of coagulate together in a way, these crazy people, and build some sort of online community where they feel empowered and feel like they have a voice and all this stuff. And so I think you're seeing both. I think you're seeing the fakes and the bots and the foreign influence, the deliberate, division tactics going on. And then you're also seeing the legitimate, these are actual neo-Nazis, actual ethno-nationalists, actual ideologues that just hate freedom and hate the Constitution and want to voice it online because they can't do it in their own personal lives to anyone because they're going to be written off as insane immediately. So, yes. And they always hide behind anon accounts almost every time.
Yes.
And so I think it's a little bit of both. I think as well, you're seeing, again, people like Joel Webbin who feel empowered by this, and they're going to edge it on and constantly be pouring gasoline onto this fire instead of having a pastoral approach to these things and trying to be above reproach and trying to be and trying to emphasize personal holiness, not only in his own life, but in the people that he's, drawing to him by his ministry. Instead, he's just provoking and trying to stir up the anger and stir up the resentment and stir up the fighting and stir up the revolution. I think he's loving I think for people like Joel Webbin, I don't think it matters whether it's fake bots or whether it's real people. He's getting the outcome that he wants at the end of the day, and that's to feel politically and socially empowered in whatever circle he's wanting to feel that way. And so I don't know. I think it's a little bit about. I think there is a lot more bots than people want to admit. I was going to add this as well, really quick. One of the big slogans that you see from the Christian nationalists, particularly the Right Response Ministries, Christendom Press, Stephen Wolfe adjacent ones, Andrew Torber, etc. And a lot of these guys are like really hyper reformed post-millennial Calvinists, which is another weird. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but another phrase you'll see them say a lot of times is "no enemies to the right," or they'll say "no more brother wars." I mean, think about how inviting that is to bots, to people that just want to cause a problem. It might as well just say, they might as well just put a banner in their Twitter profile that says "Feds are welcome here," because if they're not checking for enemies on their right, ding, 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 that's where there's going to be infiltration and bad actors and people that are trying to subvert the conservative movement or the Christian political movement in this country. And that's, I think, what you're saying. And so and whether Joel Webben and these guys are too dumb to realize that, or they don't care because they're getting all the clicks they want, who knows? Either way, it's bad. It's not a good outcome.
Either way, it's bad. And it's also a very selfish, I think, self-interested rule to have, because it doesn't prevent you from attacking other people. Like, as we saw, he was telling Anons to attack Owen, what's his name?
Owen Strachan. Or Eric Conn did the same thing, tweeting like "Long live the Anon army," and then he put a picture of some I forget who it was, some like crusader king or something with the blue eyes and the red background. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows what that is. Everybody knows what he's signaling. These are not people that act in a Christ-like way. These are people that slander you and call you names and post profanity all over your profile, and it's DM you. I've gotten DMs from these people before, like just terrible things.
Vulgar.
I would never say to anyone in person.
Vulgar. It's like, what do you think you're representing Christ well? Do you think that when people read this, that they see Christ in you, and that they're like, I just don't understand. I think a lot of these people are just disconnected from themselves. Even the bot. I'm talking about the Anon bot, the ones who send the vulgar stuff and the disgusting stuff and have like Christ is King in their profile. I'm like, you're completely disconnected from yourself, from language, from everything, from God. Like, you're just, I don't know.
It's just evil. It's just outright evil. I don't know even how else to describe it at this point. It's nothing. And I think that's honestly kind of to get to the most, at least in my view, the most concerning part about all this is not that these people have necessarily some large institutional power, at least at this point, to be determined. We'll see where this all goes. We'll see if enough people catch on to the fact that this stuff is actually evil, that fascism is not the lone bulwark against communism. No. Reject it, people, if you're watching this. This is a lie, right? We've been down this road before in history. Doesn't turn out too well. And but I don't know if it's regardless of all that stuff, I think the problem is what it's doing to individual souls, what it's doing to individual people. I know people personally that are kind of hook, line, and sinker buying into this stuff. They're angry about the political left. Maybe they lost their job because of it. Maybe they lost their church over it. Maybe they lost some friends or family members that don't talk to them anymore because they stood up for conservative values, and they're angry and they want someone to attack. They want a boogeyman. They want something to blame. And they turn to these guys, just like the woke left leaders do. They say, hey, we're here. We'll give you someone to blame. We'll make you feel like the victim. You did nothing wrong. You have nothing to take responsibility for. The enemy's over there. Do whatever you can to attack them by whatever means. Go for it. Try and crush them. And I think this is again exactly what you see from the woke left. This is exactly what you see from the woke right over here. Is they're giving disaffected young men who have, frankly, a lot of legitimate reasons to be angry at our society.
Yes.
Our society has not been kind over the last decade to young men in particular. And there's some they have a legitimate frustration. And I don't think that should go without saying. But the way to approach that frustration isn't to commit the very same evil that you're accusing your perpetrators of committing. But that's what they're doing. And it makes them feel morally superior, makes them feel powerful, where they've had power stripped from them in society in many ways. And it's just corrupting people's souls. Again, I know people that have gone down this path personally. They've become almost, in some ways, unbearable to be around. All they want to talk about is how the Jews are evil. All they want to talk about is how, multi-ethnic society is bad. And they're just angry people. They're easily triggered, easily set off. They remind me of a lot of people that I used to go interview when I was going and interviewing woke people. It's the same.
Emotional.
Overly emotional. They're being led by their emotions. They're not being led by the Spirit of God. They're being led by their flesh and by their passions and their angry impulses. And then the fact that, going back to this, the fact that pastors like Joel Webben and Eric Conn and Christian leaders like so-called Christian leaders like Stephen Wolfe or Andrew Torba or A.D. Robles or so many of these people are encouraging this. It's like, it's got to stop. If any of these guys are watching this, stop what you're doing.
It's
Like,
soul destroying to these. Thank you for saying this. My next question for you was going to be, why are people falling for this? And I'm glad you mentioned that there are plenty of reasons for men, especially white men in Western society, to have a lot of resentments built up. But the Christian answer to resentment is it's not to throw gasoline on that fire. It's not to grow more resentment. It's not to find a boogeyman to punish. It everything about it. It's as a result of this conversation, we've only been talking for about an hour. I'm starting to maybe get more on board with the phrase woke right, because as you said, it's the same thing. They're saying, yes, feed the resentment, here's the enemy to attack. All of your problems are outside of you, not inside,
Exactly. There's no focus on personal holiness, and there's no focus on whether you're doing the right thing, checking your own motives, repenting of your own personal sin. I don't hear, this is the thing. If they want to use the term Christian nationalism and they want to talk about having a nation that's Christian, that loves God, that honors his law, that reveres his word, then why do I not hear any of these guys talk about evangelizing their neighbors? Why do I not hear any of these guys talk about personal holiness and actually becoming conformed to the image of Christ? It's all about attacking people politically and assuming political power so you can crush people that you don't like and that don't agree with you. That's not, you're never going to, good luck getting a Christian nation. Like, did the Third Reich turn into a Christian nation? No. Did Franco's Spain turn into a Christian nation? Is that the Christian nation we want? No. Mussolini? No. You go down the list. Everybody that's promised this, that's implemented this crazy, these crazy fascistic ideas all under the brand of Christianity, it's never turned out right. Why? Because this isn't how Christians are called to live. Period. Yes. This is not how we're called to interact with the world around us. We're not supposed to be angry. We're not supposed to be vengeful people. We're supposed to be gracious and compassionate. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a backbone and that we shouldn't stand up for what's right and that we should, push back when we need to. But that shouldn't be the call of our lives, and the mission of our lives as Christians shouldn't be to maintain political power, and it certainly shouldn't be to maintain political power for the purpose of crushing people that we don't like. That is just, you're like, people that are doing this, again, if anyone's watching this and you're falling down this, you're going down this path, stop what you're doing. You're not anti-conservative or anti-Christian if you don't go along with these people. Like, I'm wearing a Trump hoodie.
I have my MAGA hat on today.
I'm a conservative. Like, I am a diehard, lifelong conservative Christian. I've been on the right my whole life, and I'm adamantly rejecting these people. I think this is a lie how they get a lot of people. They convince young men that if you don't subscribe to them, well, you're not a real conservative. You're not actually fighting the left. You're not even a Christian. It's a complete lie. You can be a conservative and a Trump voter and a Republican and completely reject this stuff at the same time. This stuff is actually not compatible with any of those things.
And I think if you're a Christian, you're commanded to reject this stuff.
Yes.
Like that's part of what you're called to do, and to speak truth and to imitate Christ. I just right before the year ended, I got another book on the book list for 2024 because my husband and I went to this used bookstore, and I found a copy of The Imitation of Christ for $2, and I've never read it. Have you read it?
No, I haven't actually. Okay,
so there's a lot of debate over who actually wrote it, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name. That the version, the edition that I read, attributed it to this guy in the 1300s. If I can find his name, I'll tell you. But anyway, Thomas de Kempis is the one that put it out, and this is supposedly, according to the stuff I read online, it's like the second most popular book behind the Bible. And it's a very quick read. My husband made tortillas, and while he was cooking for us, I read the whole book out loud. We finished the whole book while he was cooking. And the whole book is meditations on how to imitate Christ. It was written supposedly by this guy who was a very successful lawyer and who, had achieved all this worldly success, found it lacking, left everything, sold his possessions, joined a monastery for a while, ended up not becoming a monk, but had a gift for public speaking, became a preacher. He led a lot of people to Christ in Holland, and he was disciplined by the clergy for speaking about the vices of the clergy, and they actually removed his license to preach because he was critical of the church. And so he started this group, this brotherhood that was basically holy men who wanted to pursue holiness and to imitate Christ in their lives and with their families. And it's what I wish, it's the book I wish I could give to all of these lost boys, these Peter Pans who are following, because it's, like I said, it's a very quick read, and it's all about here inside. It's all about you, like your behavior, your thoughts, your purity, your holiness, like, and anyway, I don't know if I'm, it's no, so good.
I'm with you. It kind of reminds me of that famous Jordan Peterson quote where he talks about, clean up your own room before you go and try and clean up the world. That's a Christian idea. It's this idea of like, we're first and foremost, Christianity is it's an individualistic religion in many ways. Not that it's not also communal. Of course, there's the church and the body of Christ, but it starts with the individual, right? And so the purpose of the community is to serve the personal holiness of the individual. And so if we're not focusing on that, and if our mission constantly is fighting all the evil out there, when we can't even bridle our own tongue, when we're slandering people online, when we're calling people gay and retarded and all sorts of names that we don't like, and DMing people that we don't like, and talking about crushing our enemies. Meanwhile, we can't even get along with our family, and we can't even, we don't work hard. We're complainers. We're grifters. We're selfish. We're ego-driven, whatever it might be. We're a joke. And this is exactly, like, if we want to make real lasting, I'll say this to all Christian nationalists out there, however you want to use the term. If you want to have a Christian nation, it starts with you. It starts with you cleaning up your own room. It starts with you, making sure you're doing the right thing, making sure you're actually obeying God. Good book on this. I mean, the book that you said as well, but even in Scripture, the book of James, the whole thing is about what does it actually look like to be a Christian? Mm-hmm. What should your life, if your life doesn't look like that, start there. Don't worry so much about the political sphere or what's going on in the culture out there that you can't even necessarily control. Start there. And that more will change there than hyperfixating on crushing the political enemies out there. You know what I mean? And so it's that's the message that I think is becoming completely lost. Everything is overly political. Everything is overly external, and we're losing what it actually means to be Christians in the first place. The purpose of the Christian church, both us personally and the mission of the church at large, is not to assume political power. It's just not. The purpose of the Christian and of the Christian church is to save souls, is to evangelize the lost, is to call people to obedience to Christ, is to disciple the nations. And guess what? Whether we have all the political power or literally none, like the early church did, our mission stays exactly the same. It doesn't actually matter at the end of the day. As crazy as, and I know that's going to upset a lot of people, but what it's good for Christians to have power. If Christians don't have power, then if Christians don't have political power, then people who hate God will have political power. And yes, that's true. I'm not saying we shouldn't try and do our best in the position that God has put us in.
Involved in our communities and in our country and politics, yes.
But it's not the end of the world.
Yes.
Like, look at the early church. I think a lot of these people just maybe don't understand church history that well. For the first 300 years of the church before the Edict of Milan, the Jews were persecuting the Christians, the Romans were persecuting the Christians, other people were. It was hostility to the max. We had no political leverage as Christians back then. And yet the church grew exponentially to the point where the political sphere actually changed. So what came first? It was the church evangelizing the lost. It was Christians acting like Christians. It wasn't Christians full of revenge and hate and wanting to crush their enemies. It was Christians loving their enemies and, being willing to sacrifice their own lives for the sake of the gospel that changed the lives of so many people, that converted so many people through the Spirit of God. I mean, read the book of Acts. It's the first history of the early church. That's what was happening. It was the Spirit of God working in the lives of Christians to actually change the world around them, not through political means. And it's by those spiritual means that the political world was actually changed. But we want to flip that around and say we need to change the political before we can actually before we can change,
No,
reach the individual.
the
It's the
political
opposite's true.
follows. The
The
political
opposite's true.
follows. Yes, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. Look, if we are fulfilling our commandment to win souls to Christ, right? To speak about the glory of God, then the rest follows. It's like I
Exactly.
completely agree. It's like viewing it out of order almost.
Well, we're not going to have a Christian nation unless we actually have Christians in the nation. And so if we're not concerned about evangelizing people, if we want to hate Jewish people rather than evangelize them, we're never going to have a Christian nation. Sorry to break it to all you Christian nationalists out there. You can only have a Christian nation, a nation that loves God, if people are actually regenerate and born again and have the Spirit of God dwelling within them. That's the only way. And so if we're going to skip over that part and then call ourselves Christian nationalists, it really isn't the Christianity that we're after. It's the nationalism and the political power that we're after.
Yes.
And once we get to that end, what do they like? Do these people not think through this? If that's our goal, let's say these people attain all the political power and we have this monarchistic dictatorship going on. What do you think that person's going to do to the church? What do they think that person's going to do to the church? Or how do they think they're going to treat Christians that aren't interested in this stuff? It's going to be really ugly. And again, that's what's going to happen. You look at civilizations in the past, just even in the recent past, with the Third Reich, the German, the Nazi movement kind of started as a Christian resistance against Soviet communism. With one movement was I think it was called the Deutsche Christen movement or something like that, where it started off as this, what we're seeing now, this kind of Christian nationalist. We're the lone bulwark against the left. We're the lone bulwark against the evil Soviets and socialists. And but what did that really turn into? What was it revealed? What was revealed at the end of the day? It's that it really was never about the Christian part. It really was never about honoring God and loving His law and treating people as Jesus would. It was about the political power, and the Christianity was just the Trojan horse that would get them there. And I think we're seeing the same thing.
We're seeing the same thing. It's just like how the identity politics is just the Trojan horse for the commies, for the woke. At the end of the day, they don't follow any of their rules about race. They don't follow any of their rules about the identity politics, but they have all these rules. This is what they use. It's the mechanism that they're using. But I think it's very similar. They're trying to use Christianity as that clever disguise. Yeah. Oh, there's so much I want to say to you. You're just making me think about, about the Spirit of Christ inhabiting us and how that changes us necessarily, and all the verses about you shall know them by their fruits, and the way in which this flows just naturally. It's not, sometimes I think some of these guys who are all about the political power and crushing enemies and who are behaving in ways that are not befitting a pastor, in my opinion, that they're trying to lead with force of will. But the way I understand it and the way it's unraveled for me is that my will follows, or as my pastor talks about, my will follows my heart, my desire for God. It naturally, when I try to say I'm going to live this way because this is the Christian way, and I am doing it and I am choosing and I am in control, and instead of letting God lead me and putting my faith in God to help me with whatever it is in my personal behavior and in the holiness of my heart, then it's usually I fail because I'm not great at willpower, first of all. And also that's very ego driven of I can do it. And I'm going to, I don't know if I'm making sense, but you're making my mind.
No, it makes total sense. I think everything just, I try to think about this way. Imagine if Eric Conn and Joel Webb and all of these Christian nationalist guys that talk about political power, they host conferences about it. They have whole podcasts where that's all they pretty much talk about. Imagine if they spent even half the amount of energy talking about evangelism and strategizing, actually going out and evangelizing your local communities that you're in. How are you going to how are you going to reach out to people that need Jesus, that are at your job, that are, at the grocery store down the street from you, that are at the school that you go to, whatever it might be, that are online, right? How are you going to actually imagine how different their ministries would look, and how much good fruit it would actually be bearing if they were focusing on what Christians ought to be focusing on in the first place. But they're not. They're skipping over that part, and it's all about kind of what you said, where it's all about willpower and force, and which is really what political power is. It's this forceful, I'm going to force my moral opinions and convictions on you, but I'm not actually going to care about whether or not you want to do it. But that's what separates Christianity from every other religion. Every other religion, more or less, is here's a list of rules, follow them, whether you want to or not. Christianity is all about the heart. You're supposed to want to do those things. You're supposed to delight in the law of the Lord. Jesus isn't after your actions; he's after your heart. And in your heart change, that's where the book of James comes in. That when your heart is changed, when your heart is transformed, that's when the actions actually set in. That's when you start to obey. That's when you're sanctified into the image of Christ. And so again, if we want to have a Christian nation, we need to start there. And if you're watching this and you see a lot of people online skipping over that step, mark and avoid those people, because
Yes.
it is not Christianity that they are after. Right. And the nation that they will impose, if they ever get the opportunity, will not be one that you want to live in. I will tell you that right now.
I just want to tell you, if there's any young man watching who's kind of, and if you are flirting with this whole movement and with these ideas, and if you're in that place where you're like, well, right now I'm just asking questions. Okay, ask your questions. But the book that I mentioned, The Imitation of Christ, I just want to mention, I found the name. There's a lot of disagreement over who wrote it, but the one that I read, they were attributing it to Gerhard Groot, and it's just a beautiful book. Go pick it up. Read the
I'll
book
have to
of
look
James.
that up. I've heard of it before. I've never. It's probably my dad has a whole bookshelf over here, an old bookshelf that's still sitting here. It's just like a huge wall of, I don't know how many books. I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
I bet it's
in
there.
Dig through it. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like I was the only person who probably had not read it. So I'm like, oh, okay, now I've got this last book of 2024, and it ended up being such a delight, like just beautiful. Mikale, there's so much I can talk to you about. I hope that I'm going to wrap it up here so we don't go on too long.
Yes.
But I would love for you to come back. We do a Christian panel every 2 weeks, and we try and talk about things that, well, sometimes we do culture critiques, but we try and talk about things we're also possibly going to be excited about that are positive. So we review movies and books and things like that. So you're always welcome to join us.
I would love to. Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. And if there's anything you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to express during our conversation.
I think we covered a lot of ground. We covered a lot more topics than I thought we would today, which is good.
We did.
I hope we gave the viewers something to chew on at least.
Yeah.
I think for anybody out there watching, I think a big thing too, and I've harped on this a lot online on Twitter, or on X. Sorry, you got to be fancy now and call it X. But it's a lot of these guys, just celebrity pastors or Christian leaders in general. We don't need to follow them. We don't need to go to them for our theological advice, for political advice. Like, that's what your church is for. That's what your local pastor is for. That's what your friends that actually know you and that are actually involved in your life and your family are for. That's what your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your husband or wife is for. Outsourcing the discipleship, in other words, to Joel Webben or Doug Wilson, and by the way, all these guys have said a lot of things that I agree with. I'm not throwing them 100% under the bus, but at the same time, they're not there for the purpose of discipling you as an individual, or they shouldn't be, at least. That shouldn't be there. There's people that God has sovereignly placed in your life that are actually in your life, that know you personally, where that's what that's for. I'm not saying you can't go to, watch a podcast like this or go to certain other podcasts and get useful things from. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of these people that are falling for political extremism on one side or the other, they have no real discipleship going on in their own personal life with people they know. They're not involved in their church. They're probably not members anywhere. They don't have Christian friends or family members that are guiding them in a proper direction. That would rightly, if like if I went to my dad and told him, hey, here's what I believe, and I started spouting off all the stuff that Stephen Wolfe believes, he would look at me like I'm crazy and rightfully correct my opinions. Mm-hmm. And knowing the history of who he is in my life, I should take that seriously and listen to him, right? But a lot of people don't have that in their life, and so they turn to Doug Wilson, or they'll turn to these people that are just chronically online, whose whole ministries and business model is getting clicks, and they'll say outlandish, crazy things in order to keep the click, train rolling, so they can keep getting money and subscribes and Patreon, payers and all this stuff. This is not what, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a lot here.
No.
But this is not what this is not how God ultimately designed discipleship to work.
It's not discipleship. It can be used. It's very useful in terms of this culture war, this spiritual war that we've been in. I think to have Christians who are, as you mentioned, a lot of these guys were rightfully speaking out during the COVID years, speaking out against authoritarianism, speaking out against evil, and you do need voices who are doing that, who have a large reach. I agree, but what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that's not individual discipleship, though. That's not like
online ministry like this should be like a supplement, not the whole meal.
Right.
But a lot of people use it as the meal, and again, they're not really involved. I would love to do a survey of, let's say, the Groypers or a lot of these, bot Christian nationalist anon people. How many of them actually go to church every week? Mm-hmm. How many of them actually have a relationship with their pastor? How many of them actually are involved in something at their church more than just showing up on Sunday morning and dipping before anyone has the opportunity to talk to them? Probably not any. Probably very, very few, if I had to guess. And that's really sad. And again, if you're one of these people watching this, turn Twitter off, log off for a while, go touch some grass outside, drink a beer if you have to with some friends, go to church, get involved, build relationships. If you're not dating, go date somebody. If you're not married, pursue that end. You're going to have way more satisfaction, and you're going to be way more grounded in your life than if you're just constantly going to the next trending YouTube celebrity pastor who's going to solve all your problems for you. It's a farce. In other words, it's not how we're supposed to be living as Christians. So
I'm so glad you said that. I've encouraged people who here at Deprogrammed. I know some people that are like, well, I can't find a really grounded church or pastor, or I have a bad experience with church. And I'm always like, trust me though, I'm telling you, if you keep looking, God's going to lead you to that home. And I am so grateful, so grateful that happened for me. And that nothing beats those actual real world relationships with people who are much wiser, much more holy than I am, and who can keep me in check, actually, who I trust to tell me the truth and not to flatter me or, anyway.
Yeah, and church is what you make it. Church is what you make it. A lot of people, they'll go to church and they'll find one thing they don't like, and then they're like, I got to leave. This isn't right. And obviously there's legitimate reasons to leave. I've left a church due to the whole Acts 29 thing, for example. And it's a church that I still, to this day, really love, and I love a lot of people there, and I'm still on good terms with the pastors and everything there. But it just, as far as that goes, I'm like, I can't give money to a church that's giving money to this. And there's legitimate reasons where you should leave. But at the same time, a lot of people leave for not legitimate reasons, just because they have some personal gripe with some secondary issue. And that's actually another thing that, we'll wrap this up here. But one thing I noticed with a lot of these Christian nationalist leaders is they almost gloat about getting people to leave the churches that they're at. Have you noticed this online?
I haven't noticed that yet. No.
I've noticed this with a couple of these guys where they almost gloat about getting people to leave a church that's not a Christian nationalist church. It's like, why are we celebrating this? This is not good. That's never a good thing. When you have to leave a church, it's never something that you should be happy about. Even if you had to leave for legitimate reasons, it shouldn't be something where you're like, yeah, I got to leave. Like, yeah, screw them. No, then you're the problem. If you're leaving a church and that's your attitude, it's probably not the church that's the problem. It's probably you. And so that's what I would encourage people. Like, put your secondary personal issues aside. go to a church for the purpose of trying to serve, not looking. It's kind of like the JFK. How can what's the famous quote about serving your country and not how your country could serve you, or whatever it is?
How can I be of use?
Yeah.
Be here, but I know the quote you're talking about.
Yeah,
it's not what you can do for. It's not what your country can do for you.
RFK would be punching me right now for not getting this quote right. But yeah, that's the attitude I think we should have. And I think once people, and I've noticed this even in my own personal life, once you start to have that attitude, you don't care as much about the political. It's not as interesting to you. You're not so obsessed with external problems when you're trying to actually be of service to people in your own life. It completely. I've noticed this even. So I'm not married yet, but I'm dating a girl right now, and I've even noticed that in my relationship with her. The more I'm focused on, trying to love her and serve her and be kind to her and all that stuff, the less I'm concerned about little personal things that she does that I don't necessarily like all the time, or the less I'm concerned about other problems in my life that are frustrating, or problems in the world. Even the less I'm concerned about sitting on Twitter and complaining, and I do that plenty enough. But you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. But
it makes absolute sense. And gosh, what perfect timing, because I saw this post from my friend Samuel Say today. Let me just show you this, because this is totally what you're talking about serving. And he says, can you see that?
Oh no. There we go. It's
yeah.
Right now.
So he said, I've been married for less than 3 years, so I know almost next to nothing about marriage. But so far, this is something I've learned in my marriage. The more my wife serves me, the more I want to serve her. The more I serve her, the more she wants to serve me. And then he put the verse Romans 12:10, outdo one another in showing honor.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if that was it. I think that, here's the thing. Speaking of Christian nationalism, I think that if people had that attitude, if Christians actually started to live like Christians again in America, which there's a lot that do, and praise God for that. But if a lot of these really politically active people, and I'm not saying it's bad to be politically active. I mean, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, I write about politics, but
right.
If people were more concerned, even in those endeavors, of how they can actually serve people, how they can actually tell the truth in a way that's going to build somebody up instead of tear somebody down, that's going to, at the end of the day, do it in the service of being more like Christ and loving people for the purpose of pointing people towards him, as he's their best, he's the greatest thing in the world. Everything we do should be to point people towards him. Otherwise, what are we doing? And if that was the aim of Christians, I think that we could be politically active and engaged and challenging to the world around us and brave and courageous and all these things, but we could do it in a way that's loving and that puts that at the forefront, that I think would have far more of an impact on the world around us than what we're doing right now. Because right now we're just doing this. We're like the clanging gong and loud cymbal that's just the world and everyone around just wanted to plug their ears. And it's even I want to do that as a Christian.
It's not about not being involved in politics or wanting to be involved in making your community and your state and your country a more Christ-loving place. It's about the priority where you put
about
politics.
How we do that.
Yeah, and how you do it, and in your hierarchy of loves, is that what people call it? That a permanent pastor call it that. Where that is on the list, it's sort of, I've got on that my list of loves and my obedience to, my husband's at the top. I mean, there's God at the top, and then, but if I'm talking about the things here on earth, it's like my husband, and then my family and community, and my church included in that, and then my state, and then my nation.
Yes.
It's on there, but
certainly shouldn't be the top priority. And I think I think a lot of people right now in this whole woke right Christian nationalism phenomena, it's your nation at the top. Well, they'll say it's God, but really the way that they live says otherwise. And so if you really look at how they're living, it's the nation at the top, and then their political ideology and all this stuff. And then underneath that is, well, your church and your family and your loved ones and your job. And it's like, it should be reversed. Yeah. In fact, the nation is nothing without this other stuff. And man, I hope it changes. I'm not super optimistic at the end of the day. but we'll see. To be
We'll
determined.
see.
You
To
know,
be determined.
yeah.
Well, I'm very happy to have met you. Mikale Olson, everybody. We
Yes.
have links below where people can find you online. Just tell people really quickly what you have going on, where they can check you out.
Yeah, so I'm as she said before, I've been contributing over at the Federalist a little bit. I have a few articles over there, so you can go search my name over there and you'll find it. Twitter is my username here, at Real Mick Olson, or X. Sorry, I keep saying Twitter. Sorry, Elon Musk. But and then my YouTube is the same thing, so youtube.com/Real Mick Olson, same username. Then that's linked in my Twitter, so if you find me on Twitter, you'll see that. And then actually, this is cool. So I'm in the process right now of starting to write for Christian Post and Not the Bee, Babylon Bee's thing. So there'll be two. Stay tuned for that. That stuff will be coming soon. So soon you'll be able to find me over there. All that. I should probably make like a link tree or something and put all this stuff in there once it gets rolling. So, but Twitter is kind of like the one-stop shop, I guess, for now. So go check that out.
Well, we're very grateful to have you here. Thank you so much. Have a great new year.
It's been a pleasure. Appreciate
and
it.
I'm sure we'll talk again.
Absolutely.
Take care. Thank you, guys.
Yep.